Hey, what's going on guys? HyperX here. Welcome back to another video for Ghost of Tsushima Legends. And today I want to give you a guide on how to complete the first chapter of the raid. The raid itself went live yesterday and it's broken into 3 different chapters. The first 2 of which are multiple different phases. The final one is the boss. I'll be working on different videos for the different chapters, but for the time being I want to focus on chapter 1, which is broken down into 6/7 chunks, depending on, of course, how you segment the raid. So I want to go through and basically just explain the mechanics and try and give you guys all the information you need to come out victorious. So if you do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below, let me know what you guys think. Honestly, the raid itself is visually, it's just incredible. I mean, just the whole thing is, for something that's free, and for a game that honestly you wouldn't typically associate with having a raid, it is fantastically done. It is tough, and depending, of course, the team setup you have, it can be even more challenging. We went in with a balanced team. We had a hunter, a ronin, a samurai, and an assassin. But the one thing I will say is that if you don't have, high enough level gear, or you don't have a good enough build, and say you've just got some random pieces thrown together, then there are sections where you definitely will struggle. We have a hunter that has incredible AoE damage and is just great at just blitzing through enemies. So, there are some places where you need to defend points where if you don't have things like that, it could be a little bit more tricky, but regardless, let's go over the mechanics. So, to begin with, chapter number 1 starts off with what we'll call the red egg phase. You'll encounter this a couple of times throughout the raid, but the core principle is that littered around this first area are a number of these red sort of hearts coming out the ground. They look kind of egg-shaped, hence why we're calling them red eggs. And what you basically need to do is you need to burst these eggs, and some of them, not all of them, but some of them will contain a white obelisk. You then need to pick this up and you need to run this to the gate at the back of the area or the arena, and you have to place it down. There are 3 of these located around the map. Once you've placed all 3, the doorway will open and that first area will be complete. Now when it comes to breaking open the red eggs, what you have to do is you have to kill enemies close to the eggs, because every enemy that dies in the raid basically explodes, which in and of itself is quite dangerous. It will get you killed from time to time, but that is also a necessary mechanic in order to break the eggs. So what you need to do is basically fight around them, have enemies flock towards you, and it will take 2 exploding enemies to break an egg. So quite simply, you run to an egg, defeat some enemies, let them blow it up. If it opens up and there is nothing inside, you simply move to the next one. However, if it does open up and there is an obelisk inside, then you can of course move that to the door. I would recommend trying to clear as many enemies as possible. They will keep spawning in waves, so you can't get to a point where you've just cleared everyone and it's just peaceful and easy to run around. So you do need to do a certain degree of juggling. One good tip here is that anytime you go to carry an obelisk, if you have an assassin who can basically group vanish you, then you can just walk past the targets. But regardless, the main thing here is kill enemies, buy the eggs, cause them to explode, find those obelisks, place them at the top of the stairs in the 3 points, and once you've done that, the door will open, and that is phase 1 complete. Moving on from there to phase 2, the kind of climbing / platforming sections. Honestly, I love these ones. Anytime I get to do any sort of platforming, climbing and exploring in games like this, I absolutely love it. The first one is pretty simple. It works around a teamwork button system. So what will happen is you'll stand on buttons, it will spawn some platforms, you will need to remain standing on a button while your team will cross the platforms, and then typically on the other side there will be an opposing button which they will stand on. That will then create the platforms for you so you can then cross over, and it's a case of repeating this until you get to the end. The one thing worth noting, however, towards the end of this section, it will introduce you to a mechanic that will be present throughout the rest of the raid, and that is the floating red eyes or red orbs. Basically, these will be, they kind of act like spotlights if you've played any sort of stealth sneaking games, only the difference is if you get caught inside this and you stay in it for too long, you will be bound in place, wood will start to wrap around you, and your teammates will either need to hit you or shoot you, or in fact if you just get hit in any capacity, if an enemy will hit you, it will also break you free. However, conversely, if you're not broken free of this, eventually you will die. So it is necessary to call out if you get bound by these red eyes, as you will need someone to set you free. However, beyond that point, again, follow the principle, press the buttons, cross the platforms, cross all the way to the end, and you get to the end of this section. Moving on from there to stage 3, we then get to the village of the disciples. Now this area is broken into 2 phases. The first one, pretty simple, you just need to kill everyone in the village. Nothing special, there are some eyes there, so again, they follow the same mechanic. If you get caught by them, you will of course freeze or be bound by this wood, so you will of course need someone to set you free. So basically, avoid the eyes and kill the enemies, and then work your way to the top of the area where you will find a blood altar or a soul well, and this you need to stand in to initiate the next phase. Now this next phase isn't too difficult, it just requires some understanding. So what you'll need to do is split your team and have one person remain standing inside the well. The reason for this is because this whole phase revolves around going out, killing a particular enemy mob, gathering some souls, returning to the well, standing in it to drain those souls, which you will then use to open the door or fill the door, and of course you then repeat the process. It's worth noting that if you do not stand in the circle, the souls will drain, so it's worth having someone standing there basically all the time. We recommend having a hunter there because of course they can then use their range to their advantage, they can pick off enemies rushing the well, and it's just a pretty good and easy way to do it. The thing worth looking out for is that during this phase, a message on the side of the screen will come up that will say a blood touch disciple has appeared, and the easiest way to find them is that if you look around the map you will see this big red beacon emanating outside of a building, so it's basically just like a big waypoint to say this is where you need to go. Now there'll often be multiple spawns, so it's advisable to divide your team and send them to different locations. What will happen is you go to that location, within that there will be a blood touch disciple, they're incredibly easy to kill, you just one shot them, and upon killing them you will get 10 souls on the left side of your screen. Now this number will deteriorate over time, but it is worth noting that if you kill enemies whilst you have souls, you can increase the number of souls you have. The maximum is 20, so what you can do is kill a disciple and kill a bunch of enemies and just increase that number. But effectively, what you then need to do is once you are holding on to a number of souls, you need to return to the blood well or the soul well, and you need to stand on it until all of them are drained. And if you look at the door at the back of the arena, you will see that it gradually fills with blood. The idea is you repeat this process until you fill the door, it opens up, and you win. So for the most part, again, pretty simple. The main thing is you just want to avoid being overrun. Of course, there are again red eyes in this arena, so you need to avoid getting stuck by the red eyes, overrun by enemies, and of course losing your souls. It is also worth noting that in every single phase of this raid there is one overarching mechanic, which is that Iyo will start looking for you, Iyo of course being the main boss. Now this is basically just a standard sort of raid timer mechanic. It's pretty generous, but if you start taking too long, there'll be a message on the side of the screen that will appear that will say Iyo is searching for you. And then as you go on, it will say Iyo is close to finding you, and then eventually if you take too long, your screen will start to have like a load of black effects close in on it, your vision will go away, and then eventually you'll see Io's mask and you will just wipe. So that's basically your overarching mechanic to stop you from taking too long in any particular area. So you do still need to be somewhat swift, but the main thing here is go out, kill the blood touch disciples, gather their souls, deposit them in the well, fill up the door, open the door, and you're done. Now the next stage after this one is another one of those platforming sections, again very similar to before where you have to basically juggle pressing multiple buttons. Of course you'll also have to avoid the red eyes. The one thing worth mentioning about this section is that it involves kind of splitting your team even further. You'll typically have 2 and 2 and then you'll have to send them across, have them split to find 2 buttons that will basically allow you to cross with your paired up teammate, and you'll need to basically kind of begin this process. So whereas the very first section had you all following the exact same path and just kind of taking it in turns to hold the button, this one will require splitting into pairs, but again the principle is exactly the same. Stand on buttons to reveal platforms, allowing your team to cross. Repeat this, going back and forth until everyone gets to the end. After that, you then move into the next section, which requires attunements in order to basically break open the gate. And this also introduces a mechanic which will be present in the latter part of the raid, which is basically an extension to the platforming section, which again requires attunements to cross gaps. Essentially, what you need to do in here is you need to drop down, kill the enemies again, and you want to go around and find the totems that allow you to attune to different elements. You'll start off with the sun attunement, and to the left of that there is a platform. Now, one thing worth noting here is that once you are attuned to an element, you can no longer see what symbol used to be above the platform. So typically what you'll do is you'll have 3 members of your team who will be designated as people that will pick up attunements, whether that be sun, moon, or lightning / electric, and you'll have one person who can then still see the platform icons. You can of course see them before you pick it up, but trying to remember all these platforms is kind of tricky. So anyway, point is, you pick up your attunement, you jump over, you again hold the platform, allowing your team to cross, and you then repeat the process, going around, gathering the attunements, breaking the gates as and when you see them, and dealing with any enemies that are there. This section, pretty simple, there's not really much else to it beyond that point, but again, it is an introduction to a platforming mechanic that will be much more present in Chapter 2. Anyway, once you've broken down or you've destroyed the different gates with the attunements, you will then be presented with a bridge in front of you. This one's actually pretty simple. Easiest way is just have the assassin make you all invisible and just run across the bridge. Things worth noting here, there are the eyes that can of course freeze you, and amidst all those, there are the ghost enemies who, of course, being the ghost Ronin, they hit you incredibly hard. So, easiest way again, go invisible, run past them, ignore them because this bridge section is very quick. Get to the end and you are now in the Crimson Ridge, which is the final section of Chapter 1. Now, the way this section works is there are 4 altars around this area, and you need to activate them one at a time and complete a challenge. However, the challenge comes with a condition. It will result in you losing some aspect of your gameplay, either your melee ability, your class ability, your dodging ability, or your ranged combat. So it's safe to say, if you have an evenly distributed team, it is worth picking these sensibly. If you go in and you start by going to the left, then the very first totem on the left is the one that will remove your ranged ability. In this situation, we gave that to our own assassin. So what will then happen is they will interact with the totem, and they will then have a challenge where they'll have to kill a number of enemies. It is important to note that if they die, it will reset the challenge, so you have to basically grab from the altar again. So you have to kill 8 enemies in total without dying. Pretty simple stuff. That being said, there are ghosts around here, so try to avoid them. Try to kind of help your team out by whistling down enemies' lives without actually killing them. But once the first person has completed a totem challenge, they will also lose a third of their life as a result, and they will of course have taken on the necessary debuff. Moving on from that first totem, the second one in front of it will have you remove your dodge ability. So again, this one can be kind of annoying if you're fighting heavier enemies, but complete that one and you then move on. If you go back to the main entrance and you go to the right now, this one will remove your class ability. So of course that's your standard down on the D-pad move. And since that's the one that I did as a samurai, that means I lose my ability to siphon life from enemies. But again, it's not exactly that bad. I'd rather lose my ability than have someone like our ranger or our ronin lose their abilities. Anyway, again, repeat the process, kill the number of enemies, don't die, and you move on to the final one at the very back right, which will lose your melee ability. This of course is best given to the hunter because, you know, they're a ranger, they don't necessarily need their melee weapon as much, so they can of course repeat the process. That is essentially what you need to do. Most important thing to try and keep on top of here is just your time, because of course this can take a little bit longer when you get overwhelmed with enemies, and obviously if you do take too long, again IO can find you and you can just team wipe. But if you move around as a squad and you take things out together, you do still have plenty of time and it's not too bad. But the main thing is, complete the challenges, kill the enemies, and once you complete all 4 of them, you will have completed Chapter 1 of the raid. You then cross the bridge, get to the exit, get to the Torii Gate, and you can then claim your rewards. And that, my friends, is your guide to Chapter 1 of the new raid in Ghost of Tsushima Legends. Hope you guys found that helpful. Again, if you have any questions, by all means let me know in the comments down below. And be sure to keep it locked because tomorrow we'll have a full guide on Chapter 2 for you, and of course following on from there. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, you can join the HyperX Gaming Discord. We've got an awesome community over there with so many different channels for you to chat loads of different topics and different games. I'm in there, the team's in there. If you guys want to chat with us, find people to play with, it's just in general a great place to be. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads.